If you look at South Africa specifically, and because I'm from South Africa, I can give you a more informed view. And in South Africa, it's very important, and banks have made great strides to ensure that they are protected from cyber threats. I mean, obviously, it's not about if you will be attacked; it's when you will be attacked. In South Africa, we've got a bill that's not been enacted at this point in time, but as part of the central bank, we have also issued guidance, which is linked to the CPMI, our house code principles. And from what I understand from our other colleagues in Africa, they have either issued regulations themselves from a country or central bank perspective. And this is an international issue. Cyber threats is not just in Africa or in the US or in Europe. It is pervasive across the world. And I think a lot of banks are doing something about it. Is there still things that we should be doing? Certainly, I don't think we could be complacent. And we need to learn from each other. I think that's very important. We need to collaborate, we need to share information and intel between each other about cyber incidents as well as industry practices. So if we can learn something from other regulators in terms of what they've done, I think it's very important for Africa to learn. But, and the big but is, we always need to look at it from an African context. Because the way we operate in Africa is sometimes a bit different. If we talk about financial inclusion, if you talk about mobile and how that comes into play. So I think that's a very important aspect for us.
So industry statistics indicate that cybercrime is one of the most common economic crime. But it also indicates that the most financial institutions are underprepared to fight against cybercrime. So could you break down for us measures financial institutions should take?
So, you know, financial institutions have to protect themselves. How do they protect themselves? They detect. So they get intel and they find out what they need to do about it. They need to hack themselves. You know, it's very important. You know, you can't be saying, I've got all these frameworks in place, I've got all these policies and procedures in place, but I've not hacked myself. So that's where the concept of blue teams and red teams come into play. The blue team being the ones that defend, and the red teams are the ones trying to ethically hack what's happening in the organization. And one very important aspect is to recover. As I indicated earlier, it's not when you will be attacked, not if you will be attacked, it's when you will be attacked. And all organizations can put everything in place, but the threat vectors change continuously. So banks have frameworks in place and they continuously need to see which gaps they've got in terms of new industry practices. And the continuous practices of doing blue and red teams and even purple teams are very important.
All right. So could you share with us your insights into maybe what regulations should be put in place to ensure the cybercrime is capped or dealt with effectively?
So as a regulator, it's always a difficult question because we would like to enforce certain things, and previously it's been very rules-based and very prescriptive. But because cyber moves so quickly, technology moves so quickly, we have to become quite cognizant of that. And how do we do that? We have to become more principle-based. So there needs to be a healthy balance between rules-based, where we're enforcing certain aspects, where we say you need to have a framework, you need to have a strategy, you need to have an IT security team, you need to have a cyber security team. But then you also need principle-based to say, well, let's look along these rails, and as long as you operate within these rails, then we need to share information and for the better of the whole industry. Because I've also always said, as a regulator, we need to protect and serve, because we need to protect to make sure that there's no contagion in the industry, but we also need to serve to make sure everybody understands. And that's where awareness and knowledge sharing also comes in.
All right. So what's your perspective on Africa's technology with regards to fighting against cybercrime? Are we well prepared to stand up against cybercrime?
I think we are. And I think in many instances people are not necessarily aware of it. And there's some great talent in Africa. And again, from talking to some of my colleagues and to some of the vendors that's traveled Africa extensively, there's a lot of talent, but because there's this view that Africa is behind, to the rest of the world, it's not necessarily harnessed. So sometimes we hear about talent or skills needs to be brought in from international, which I don't always believe is the truth. The problem that we have is some of the workforce talent that we have in Africa, because it's such a scarce skill, they move elsewhere. And the African context is different because we have the financial inclusion that I spoke about earlier, the different kinds of mobile money, e-banking. So I think we are prepared, but it is very difficult. And I don't want us to be complacent to say nothing will ever happen to us. But I'm sure we are doing things that we can do at this point in time.